Summary of plot. Summary of facts. Investigation of CIA involvement in plans to assassinate foreign leaders. You see JFK initials. A lot of people have said uh, over the years, the Kennedy assassination had a lot of suspects, the mafia, the CIA, uh, and they got Oswald, who did everything that would be an easy recruit to initiate him, get him in there to do the work. But then it's a whole lot of conspiracy shit. But one thing I do know is that JFK infamously said out of his mouth that he wanted to dismantle the CIA and break them into 1,000 pieces because they was too far out of control, and they did what they wanted to do. They just had got out of control, and that would be uh, major, right? Because the CIA even worked with the mafia. I remember they've been working with the mafia. They just been putting in a lot of work inside, in my personal opinion, inside the United States and definitely outside. So let's see what these declassified files say, and it's going to be eye-opening, right? It used to be top secret. Now they was declassified on 5/24/2000. All right, let's get into it. Y'all pay attention though, because it's a lot of funny shit. You can put this with FBI, Tupac, all kind of shit. CIA. All right. Summary of facts: investigation of CIA involvement in plans to assassinate foreign leaders. The following is a summary of facts gathered by the executive director of the CIA Commission concerning possible CIA involvement in plans to assassinate foreign leaders. The scope of the investigation. The first knowledge that the Commission had concerning involvement of CIA in assassination plans directed at foreign leaders was when the CIA informed the Commission staff at the outset of the Commission's work. In response to an overall staff request for possible unlawful activities of the CIA, that such plans existed. Right, so they already caught them dirty. The Commission staff was told that there was no evidence of murders or plots for murder against persons in the United States carried on by the CIA. Read that one more time, y'all. Cold world. The Commission staff was told that there was no evidence of murders or plots for murder against persons in the United States, carried on by the CIA. However, the Commission staff was told that there had been discussion of plans for assassination attempts involving overt acts occurring within the boundaries of this country with regard to attempts on the life of Cuban Premier Fidel Castro. I remember Scarface. That's where they put Scarface on the boat, and that's Fidel Castro. Determining jurisdiction. Although there were some questions whether or not an assassination plan aimed at a foreign leader fell technically within the charter of the Commission, even though overt acts may have been taking place in this country. The Commission and its staff determined that because of the nature and seriousness of the matters involved, the doubts would be resolved in favor of undertaking an investigation of the facts. Only after such investigation could the Commission make an informed decision as to its jurisdiction. On the basis of the investigation, the evidence shows that agents of the CIA were involved in planning in this country with certain citizens and others to seek to assassinate Premier Fidel Castro. They planned it in this country. Remember I told you they were working with the mafia, trying to get a 2-for-1 because the mafia had their casinos, and Fidel Castro shut everything down and made them lose millions and millions and millions. Well, this is what the CIA does. You take this all the way back to Freeway Rick Ross and how he got jammed up. Yeah, it gets deep. The evidence also shows that the CIA was involved in shipping arms from this country to persons in the Dominican Republic who sought to assassinate General Simo Trudeau, who himself had been involved in an attempt to assassinate the president of Venezuela. No evidence has been found involving any other attempts to assassinate any other foreign leader which has significant overt activities within the United States. However, the nature of the activity and the degree of secrecy and compartmentation within the agency is such that it is difficult to find any evidence of this kind unless specific facts are brought to the attention of the investigative body. And damn right there, I want you to know. With regard to activities outside of the United States, no evidence has been found of CIA participation in plans to assassinate foreign leaders, except as described in the next 4 paragraphs. Except. However, the investigation in such areas which had no domestic aspect which might bring it within the Commission's jurisdictional mandate under the President's order has not been extensive. Patrice Lumumba, in the course of the first stage of its investigation to determine its jurisdiction, a preliminary investigation was made of charges that the CIA was involved in the death of Patrice Lumumba. Let's see who that is, y'all. We're going to do some photos. Let me see who that is. Patrice Lumumba. Let me see. Let us see. Patrice Lumumba right there. Prime Minister of the Congo. Let's see what the pictures of. Oh, there you go right there, y'all. Patrice Lumumba. Prime Minister. Damn. Not bad, y'all. Prime Minister of Congo. There he is. Now we got a face in the 80s. I mean, a title. Let's go. All right, back to here. Now that we've seen it. All right. All right. So, in the course of the first stage of its investigation to determine its jurisdiction, a preliminary investigation was made of charges that the CIA was involved in the death of Patrice Lumumba, who was killed in early 1961. No evidence was found that the CIA participated in that killing, although there is evidence that prior to Lumumba's death, some CIA personnel and others discussed the possibility of undertaking a plan to assassinate Lumumba. According to Richard Bazell, who was the CIA Deputy Director of Plans at the time, he was aware of discussion of plans within the agencies concerning the possible assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and that a case officer was directed to look into the possibilities. He reported back in a matter of weeks and convinced me that this was probably unfeasible and probably an undesirable course of action. According to the case officer, who is now retired, let's read this right quick. According to the case officer, let's read this before we get back where it'll start at. In an affidavit, C. Douglas Dillon, a member of this commission, stated that while he served as Under-Secretary of State from June 1959 until early January 1961, he heard no discussion of assassination attempts against anyone, except discussions which occurred in late July or early August of 1960 at a meeting at the Pentagon, which covered a great variety of matters, in which a question regarding the possibility of an assassination attempt against Lumumba was briefly raised. The CIA representative indicated that the agency did not undertake this sort of operation. Right. This ended consideration of this subject. Now let's continue right here. According to the case officer, who is now retired, Bazell asked him to go to the Congo. Bazell asked him to go to the Congo and there murder or arrange for the murder of Lumumba. And the case officer said that he told Bazell that he refused to be a party to such an act. Bazell said the agency had nothing whatsoever to do with the death of Lumumba. Of course you would say that. President Akin Ahmed Sukarno. Ahmed, I don't know how to spell that. I mean, let's see who that is. I know I got to do it. Let me see. Ahmed. Come on, damn it. All right. Let's see. How you spell that shit? ACHMED. Yeah, I got to. Ahmed. Yeah, I see Sukarno. 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 Let me see. Former president of the Republic of Indonesia. So this is him. Former president of the Republic of Indonesia. So we got that. Putting faces to the people. Now let's continue. All right. Now I know why I keep going away to that. What the hell? All right. Here we go right here. All right. President Ahmed Sukarno. Bazell also testified that there was discussion within the agency of the possibility of an attempt on the life of President Ahmed Sukarno of Indonesia, which progressed as far as the identification of an asset who it was felt might be recruited for this purpose. An asset in CIA terms is just like somebody that they can recruit that's close to the president or whoever they're trying to assassinate to get the job done, basically. Was felt might be recruited for this purpose. Let me get some water, y'all. Hold on one second. All right. Class is back in session. Let's get it. And the water was good and cold, too. All right. All right. All right, we was on asset. All right. The plan was never reached. Was never perfected to the point where it seemed feasible. He said the agency had absolutely nothing to do with the death of Sukarno. With regard to both plans, he stated that no assassination plans would have been undertaken without authorization outside the agency, and that no such authorization was undertaken for plans against either Lumumba or Sukarno. Concurrence of the president on interpretation of authority. Since no evidence was found to bring the Sukarno and Lumumba matters within the scope of the commission's investigation. All right, let's read this start. The case officer gave this information in the oral telephone conference, at which time an appointment was arranged for the taking of his testimony before a member. So they're just saying he talked on the phone like a Zoom these days. The case officer failed to keep his appointment. Right. Since no evidence was found to bring the Sukarno and Lumumba matters within the scope of the commission's investigative authority, no further investigation in these two areas was undertaken. However, sufficient domestic, that means inside the United States, in the Castro and TRUUUUUU plans were found to constitute ground for undertaking additional investigation. That means they found out uh, the CIA was out of control. The president concurred in the approach of the commission to interpret its authority so that the commission would ascertain whether the charges of assassination plots have a basis in fact and involve unlawful domestic CIA activities. And two, determine whether existing safeguards will prevent activities of that nature in the future, regardless of whether they might involve domestic or foreign conspiracy. So they didn't give a damn. Now remember, the president at this time was JFK, and as y'all about to find out, it's gonna get a whole lot deep. Then y'all tell me what the CIA is capable of. The following is a summary of facts pertaining to CIA participation in assassination plans to assassinate Fidel Castro and CIA participation in the shipping of arms, guns, to persons in the Dominican Republic who sought to assassinate General Simo Trujillo. The facts have been developed through a review of the internal investigation of the CIA, examination of documents and interviews and testimony. The executive director requested complete access to papers of the National Security Council, including papers of the 40 Committee and its predecessors and papers of any special groups or special operating group. Such access was not granted. Also, time did not permit examination of documents that might be available in the Eisenhower, Kennedy, or Johnson presidential libraries. I know they did. It's cool. Consequently, the investigation is not complete with regard to the question of who, if anyone outside the CIA, authorized or directed the planning of any assassination attempt against foreign leaders. However, with particular reference to the plans directed against Fidel Castro, the investigation is sufficiently complete to show that plans were undertaken by the CIA. Y'all see that? All right. Next part. Participation of CIA personnel in plans to attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro. Participation, right? Supposed to be a fact. In the late 1950s, there was increasing dissatisfaction with the government of Cuban leader Batista. I know everybody know, but let me go on here and do this. Batista. Batista. B-A-T-I-S-T-A. Okay, so he the former president. So he's the one that, the former president. That's him right there, y'all. Former president of Cuba. And I think, say he was a Cuban military officer, political leader, and dictator, right? So that's him, y'all. Now let's get back. So we could get it. Get out of there. All right, back to this. So, all right, man. All right. In the late 1950s, there was increasing dissatisfaction with the government of Cuban leader Batista. As Castro's influence increased, Castro overthrew Batista. As Castro's influence increased, attempts were made to persuade Batista to resign and turn over the reins of government to a group that was more attuned to the needs and desires of the Cuban people, particularly in the areas of democratic government and social reform. According to an interview with the former chief of the CIA Western Hemisphere Division, an unofficial ambassador from this country, an unofficial ambassador from this country, the United States, approached Batista in December 1958, asking that he resign and turn over the reins of government to a new leadership. How the fuck you be an unofficial ambassador? That mean like me or you, y'all, we can go to another country and be unofficial. That's like an unauthorized biography of Tupac Shakur, right? Or Biggie. So to turn over the reins of government to a new leadership, this request was refused. So if the CIA wanted Batista out of there. Now you remember this was at the time where what they call the Cold War. That meant Russia and the United States was at a race for nuclear power, and Cuba was like in the middle of the shit, but Russia was closer to Russia, so they could use Cuba to bomb the damn United States, and that's why they call it Cold War, because anytime everybody could have been dead, and that's how. If y'all don't know, we got America, and guess me too. Then I was born in '73. Yeah, a lot of people got close to nuclear disaster. That's a little history on that. All right, so the request was refused. Fidel Castro shortly thereafter took over the Cuban government. How convenient. Now I want to see what happened to Batista, how they get him. The CIA was in it, boy. I told y'all, the movies y'all be seeing with people be having heart attacks and all kind of out the blue ass shit, healthy as hell. Fidel Castro shortly thereafter took over the Cuban government. There was great concern on the part of American leadership. Now I get it. I might have had that a little backward. So I guess the CIA wanted Batista to resign and turn over the reins of government to new leadership, but not Castro, I don't believe, because we about to see, Fidel Castro shortly thereafter took over the Cuban government. There was great concern on the part of American leadership about the presence of a government so closely aligned with the Soviet Union, barely 90 miles from American shores. Yeah, I got that part right. There it goes. It's going to be interesting for those that want to know how dirty this game is. Therefore, the CIA, with appropriate authorization, undertook the development of an operation in support of Cuban exiles seeking to overthrow the Castro government. The culmination of which became the Bay of Pigs disaster in 1961. Now, this is when Kennedy first came in to be president. He didn't make it to his second term, but he came in with a whole lot of work to do, and he was too young to understand that everybody around him was against him, right? Because he couldn't see the danger. As the plans for the attempted overthrow of the Cuban government were developed, one of the considerations related to the Fidel Castro as the dominant figure. Flying Cuban exiles into Cuba. There has been testimony before the commission staff that at the request of the CIA, the Air Force provided a plane in late 1959 or early 1960, which was used to fly 2 Cuban exiles into Cuba. The witness was unable to provide the names of these 2 Cuban exiles or names of any CIA personnel which he said were involved. However, at the time of the events, the witness was an Air Force officer who had liaison functions between the Department of Defense and the CIA. He testified that he believes a plane was provided and that the 2 Cuban exiles were to carry with them 1 or more rifles with telescopic sights to be used in an attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro. Now, getting all this, the CIA wanted that out of there. The commission staff sought to investigate this matter. In a memorandum for the record dated May 15, 1975, the CIA admitted that in reviewing its files relating to Cuban operations during the period of 1959 to 1961, A number of documents were found that referred to the intent on the part of some of the Cuban teams operating inside Cuba to attempt to assassinate Castro. Additionally, the files indicate that there was considerable interest in procurement of Helio-Courier, the silver version of the L-28. But there is no definite indication that they were intended for Cuban operations. Also, there is mention of the airdrop of Springfield rifles with telescopic sights, 1960 to 1961, and the Phase 1 plans. The Phase 1 plans involved the preparation of poison botulism pills by the CIA, the delivery of those pills to organized crime figures. I told you, the mafia. To organized crime figures who in turn were to get the pills delivered to contacts they had in Cuba for placement in a beverage to be drunk by Fidel Castro. When the plans began. There is some disagreement about exactly when the Phase 1 plans began. The two people in the CIA who were the most intimately involved were Richard Bissell, Deputy Director of Plans, who was the person in the CIA who had direct responsibility for the Bay of Pigs operation, and Colonel Sheffield Edwards, the Director of the Office of Security in the CIA. These two took it upon themselves to send somebody, use the mafia, to go poison Fidel Castro. According to Richard Bissell, the plans relating to Fidel Castro started in the very beginning of 1961, when he said he became aware of the possibility that an assassination attempt might be planned using mafia resources or syndicate resources. My very uncertain recollection is that I first heard of this possibility from Chef Edwards. According to Sheffield Edwards, his first contact with these plans was about the time of the Bay of Pigs. He said he did not remember exactly if it was before or after the Bay of Pigs, but when asked whether or not it was in the Eisenhower administration or the Kennedy administration for the purposes of determining the time of the inception of the plan, and he said that it was in the Kennedy administration. See right here, the Bay of Pigs in layman's term is that the Cubans that was exiled from Cuba, like I said, referred to the beginning of Scarface, when they got to Miami. And then you understand what exile meant. Fidel Castro cleaned house and put everybody on the boat and set sail, sent them on sail, sent them on a cruise to America, right? Now, the Bay of Pigs is when about 1,000 or so of those Cuban exiles had a plan to go take out Fidel Castro, backed up by the CIA. And why they were so mad at Kennedy, because somebody leaked the information, dropped their location, and then Kennedy didn't lift a finger to send in, like, to save theirs. Basically, he ain't want to send no airstrikes or no more men or nothing, and it was a disaster. And Fidel Castro, his team ended up capturing most of the damn exiles, and a few of them died. That's why they were pissed off at Kennedy. So you're just gonna sit here and there's a Cold War right here, and we need this. We need Cuba, because damn, the Soviet Union is man, they just 90 miles away from America. So we don't handle this, we all gonna be dead. Your ass too, basically. Now, it was the Kennedy administration. Although oral testimony of both said that this began in the early stages of the Kennedy administration, there is documentation which indicates that these conversations took place in the latter part of 1960 during the Eisenhower administration. This documentation includes a May 14, 1962 memorandum for the record entitled Arthur James Belletti, Unauthorized Publications or Use of Communications. The opening sentence of the memorandum states, this memorandum for the record was prepared at the request of the Attorney General of the United States following a complete overbriefing of him relevant to a sensitive CIA operation conducted during the period approximately August 1960 to May 1961. The overbriefing actually occurred in the offices of the Attorney General of the United States, Robert Kennedy, on May 7, 1962. Attorney General Kennedy received a copy of the May 14, 1962 memorandum for the record. Attending the oral briefings were three people: Attorney General Kennedy, Sheffield Edwards, and Lawrence Houston, General Counsel of the CIA. Right? The development of the Phase 1 plan, Section B, May 14. The May 14, 1962 memorandum was prepared by Sheffield Edwards and continued after the opening sentence. In August 1960, the undersigned was approached by Mr. Richard Bezell, then Deputy Director of Plans of the CIA, to explore the possibility of mounting this sensitive operation against Fidel Castro. It was thought that certain gambling interests, which had formerly been active in Cuba, might be willing and able to assist, and further might have both intelligence assets in Cuba and communication between Miami, Florida, and Cuba. They talking about who had the gambling interest, the mafia. The mafia. So that's why I told you at the beginning. They had some suspects that didn't like Kennedy, but they need to get Fidel Castro out of there before Soviet Union set up base and nuke us all. The memorandum then related to that an intermediary who was known to the CIA, Robert Mayhew, was approached by Colonel Sheffield Edwards. Man, come on, bro. Sheffield Edwards. Man, start that shit. Right there, computer. All right. And asked to establish contact with a member or members of the gambling syndicate to explore their capabilities. The approach was to be made to the syndicate as appearing to represent big business organizations which wish to protect their interests in Cuba. The contact was made with a syndicate member who showed interest in the possibility and indicated he had some contacts in Miami that he might use. The syndicate members supposedly told the CIA intermediary that the syndicate person who was not interested in any remuneration, but would seek to establish capabilities in Cuba to perform the desired project. That word they mean murder for hire. We've seen that on the Mode 3 shit. The memorandum continued. Towards the end of September 1960, contact with another syndicate member from Chicago, Sam Giancana, was made. And in turn, an arrangement was made through Giancana for the CIA intermediary and his contact to meet with a courier who was going back and forth to Havana. From information received back by the courier, the proposed operation appeared to be feasible, and it was decided to obtain an official agency approval in this regard. A figure of $150,000 was set by the agency as a payment to be made on completion of the operation and to be paid only to the principal or principals who would conduct the operations in Cuba. So the CIA was making deals with the mafia for $150,000, which was a lot of money back in them days, to go over there and poison the shit and take out Fidel Castro without the president's approval or whole support. Let's continue. This shit gonna get deeper and deeper. The CIA intermediary reported that Giancana and the other contact emphatically stated that they wished no part of any payment. They ain't want the money. The undersigned Sheffield Edwards then briefed the proper senior officers of this agency of the proposal. Knowledge of this project during its life was kept to a total of 6 persons and never became part of the project current at the time for the invasion of Cuba. There was no memoranda on the project, nor were there other written documents or agreements. The project was duly orally approved by the said senior officials of the agency. That means they did it behind the president back after he failed them get at the Bay of Pigs incident where Fidel Castro won. The memorandum continued that during the period from September 1960 to 1961, efforts were continued by the CIA intermediary and the mafia personnel to produce with the operation. The first principal in Cuba withdrew, and another principal was selected. Principal simply meaning contact, who gonna be running the damn show all the way until they put their paws in Castro's drink. Another principal was selected as and has been briefed to the Attorney General. So that mean even Kennedy's brother know. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, he knew what was going on. $10,000 were passed for expenses to the second principal. He was further furnished with approximately $1,000 worth of communication equipment to establish communications between his headquarters in Miami and assets in Cuba. No monies were ever paid to the syndicate personnel, the mafia. There was expense money paid to the CIA intermediary, the go-between. The memorandum stated that after the failure of the invasion of Cuba, word was sent through the CIA intermediary to the syndicate, mafia, personnel to call off the operation, with further direction that the syndicate person was told to tell his principal that the proposal to pay $150,000 for completion of the operation had been definitely withdrawn. Only 2 copies of the memorandum were prepared, one for the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, and one to be retained by the CIA. The carrying out of the phase 1 plan. Yep, man. Oh yeah, it'll be some bloodshed. The following facts primarily come from interrogation of Colonel Edwards and the Phase 1 case officer. The particular means by which the plans were to be carried out was by placing poison in his food. The syndicate personnel were to get the pills to a person in Cuba who would have access to Castro. Supposedly, the reason pills were used was that the syndicate, the mafia personnel, could not recruit personnel to undertake the assassination through gunfire because the chance of survival and escape was small. However, the case officer felt that it was the agency itself that desired to have pills used rather than gunfire. Yeah, CIA. Colonel Edwards said that he himself checked out the pills on some guinea pigs because I wanted to be sure they worked. Damn, they done killed some innocent pig for practice. Shit get wicked. Corroboration of the Phase 1 plans was also made by another retired medical officer who was familiar with the preparation of the pills inside the agency. Edwards said he did not know of any plans other than those that involved the use of these pills. Edwards did not have any first-hand knowledge about whether or not the pills ever got to Cuba. According to the Phase 1 case officer, he delivered the pills to the syndicate member and was subsequently advised by the syndicate member that the pills were in Cuba, but the case officer had no direct knowledge of his own that the pills actually got there. Richard Bassell said he did not have any personal recollection as to whether or not poison pills of any kind were ever delivered into Cuba. According to the case officer and the CIA Inspector General file, there were 2 passages of pills to Cuba in the first part of 1961. The first passage was in late February or March from the syndicate through their courier to a Cuban who supposedly had a position. I don't know why they want to hide that shit. Where he had access to Fidel Castro, had a position. So they don't want you to know what position he had. Must be a cook or something. You talking about food? And they're hard to figure out. According to the interview of Sheffield Edwards with the executive director, the Cuban asset got scared and did not try to pass the pill. Pills were subsequently delivered to another asset who was in a position to slip the pills to Castro at a restaurant where the asset worked. This took place in the March-April 1961 period. Fidel Castro ceased visiting that particular restaurant at approximately the same time the pills purportedly arrived. Oh yeah, Castro was on to him, had some intel. The case officer said it was his recollection that there were 2 passages of pills to Cuba. The second one, which was made to someone who had access to a restaurant which Castro frequented. After the second attempt failed, the case officer said the pills were returned to the CIA. Wow. The brutality wiretap. Why the May 14, 1962 memorandum was prepared. The factual situation underlying the preparation of the May 14, 1962 memorandum was that sometime in the fall of 1960, Sam Giancana, mafia boss, asked the CIA intermediary to arrange for putting a listening device in the room of an entertainer who was at the time was in Las Vegas and who Giancana thought was having an affair with another entertainer who was reputed to be Giancana's mistress. I know who they're talking about, right? Marilyn Monroe. According to the Phase 1 CIA case officer, the request by Giancana came at a crucial time when plans were underway for Phase 1. Giancana supposedly stated that if he did not get help to install a listening device, he would have to go to Las Vegas himself. Damn. He would have to go to Las Vegas himself. Come on, man. All right. The case officer said this would have interrupted the project at a very critical time, and therefore he sought the assistance of the CIA intermediary to get a private detective agency to undertake the installation of the listening device. The CIA intermediary passed the request over to another private investigator, who in turn contacted Arthur James Belletti, the name of the subject of the May 14, 1962 memorandum, for the record given to Attorney Kennedy, Attorney General Kennedy. Instead of putting a listening device in the room, Belletti put a listening device on the telephone. The listening device was discovered, and Belletti was arrested by the sheriff of Las Vegas, Nevada. At the time of the incident, the CIA did not know of the specific proposed wiretap. According to the agency investigation by the Inspector General's office in 1967, Edwards had once told the agency intermediary that if the intermediary ever got in trouble, he could say to the FBI that he was working on an intelligence operation being handled by the agency. An FBI memorandum on that matter stated that the intermediary claimed the telephone tap was ordered on behalf of the agency's effort to obtain intelligence through hoodlum elements in Cuba. So this is the FBI doing a wiretap on Marilyn Monroe phone. The agency investigation file also states that in March 23, 1962, FBI memorandum confirmed a meeting with Sheffield Edwards in which Edwards told the FBI that the intermediary was involved in a sensitive project and that the CIA would object to prosecution because it would necessitate CIA information and it could embarrass the United States government. Wow. Subsequently, there was a meeting between Sheffield Edwards and Sam Papich, the FBI liaison within the agency, in which Edwards advised Papich that it would not be in the natural interest to prosecute. At the time of that meeting, according to Edwards, who had initially authorized the assassination plans, Alan Dulles and Richard Bissell were gone, and no one else in authority, including Richard Helms, who replaced Bissell, had been cut in on the operation. Thereafter, Sheffield Edwards briefed Lawrence Houston, General Counsel for the CIA, who in turn briefed General Carter, McComb's Deputy Director of Central Intelligence. General Carter, who is now retired, lives in Colorado. When interviewed by a member of the commission staff by long-distance telephone, General Carter said that he had no recollection of this. Edwards, in his 1975 recorded interview, said that there was nothing that he knew about the plan to assassinate Castro that he didn't tell Attorney General Kennedy, and that the briefing lasted about a half an hour at least. He said he told Attorney General Kennedy everything, and that after the briefing was completed, Robert Kennedy had no comment to him, but Robert Kennedy cautioned Larry Houston to the effect that he was to know about these things. Yeah, he's like, damn, how you gonna tap Marilyn Monroe phone without telling me? Words to that effect. When asked whether or not the Attorney General had told Colonel Edwards that you shouldn't do this at all, Colonel Edwards replied no. When asked whether or not the Attorney General in any way said that he disapproved of whatever was done in the past, Colonel Edwards said no. Lawrence Houston testified, I was briefed on this subject after it was dropped. I was not party to, nor was I asked in advance about it. By the time I heard about it, I think it had been terminated some little time. But there were personalities involved who were both regarded as a part of the mafia organization, and these were people that the CIA intermediary had introduced us to. They had former gambling interests in Havana, and at one time thought they may be able to take action against Castro. After it fell through, my recollection is that they had potential criminal indictments against the mafia people, and it seems to me that the bug in the Las Vegas hotel was involved more peripherally, but I cannot remember the details. Houston also testified that he told Edwards that I thought the only thing to do was to go and tell the whole story to the Attorney General. So with the approval of the director at the time, well, it was 63. It must have been McComb. We went down to brief Mr. Kennedy on the full story that the agency had set up a project with its aim, the demise of Castro, that the project had fallen through and that these following people were involved. And we gave him the names, and this is what made him unhappy, because at that time he felt he was making a very strong drive to try to get after the mafia. So what they're saying is that's when Kennedy, that's another one of those conspiracies theories, is that the mafia helped get the president elected. Therefore, do me a favor, I do you one. Then when the president got elected, he made his brother Attorney General. And when his brother became Attorney General, the first thing he did was go after the mafia. And that pissed everybody out because I thought we had a deal. We don't play like that. So you not only do you cut off our communication with us, you put your little brother in charge and want to take us down? No. Right? Because he felt he was making a very strong drive to get after the mafia. And so his comment was to us that if we were going to get involved with the mafia in the future at any time, to make sure you see me first. This is the only evidence in the records to show that John McCone knew about the existence of any specific assassination plan in 1962. There's evidence in the CIA files to show that the actual person with whom the matter was discussed was the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence, and this evidence is supported by an August 16, 1963 memorandum from Helms to McComb, which will be discussed in the Phase 2 portion of this report. FBI memorandum concerning CIA assassination plans. Hold on. Some more of this water. Man, this shit here deep, this world, man. Come on. We don't know what's going on. We just a little people. Uh, according to a May 22nd, 1961 FBI memorandum entitled Arthur James Belletti, on May 3rd, 1961, Colonel Sheffield Edwards, Director of Security, Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, furnished the following information. Colonel Edwards advised that in connection with the CIA's operation against Castro, he personally contacted Robert Maheu during the fall of 1960 for the purpose of using Maheu as a cutout in contacts with Sam Giancana, a known hoodlum in the Chicago area. Colonel Edwards said that since the underworld controlled gambling activities in Cuba under the Batista government, it was assumed that this element would still continue to have sources and contacts in Cuba, which perhaps could be utilized successfully in connection with CIA's clandestine efforts against the Castro government. So right here we found out something else, that Batista is the one that got overthrown by Castro. Now when Castro overthrew Batista, then he shut down the mafia's business, the casino business, and that's why they were so willing to work. That's why the CIA was willing to work with them, because they already had the structure, because they had the casino. So it would be easier if they make a deal with the mafia. And then here come little brother Kennedy, going right after the mafia that just made a backdoor deal with the CIA. Let's go. All right. Against the Castro government. As a result, Maheu's services were solicited as a cutout because of his possible entry into underworld circle. Maheu obtained Sam Giancana's assistance in this regard, and according to Edwards, Giancana gave every indication of cooperating through Maheu in attempting to accomplish several clandestine efforts in Cuba. Edwards added that none of Giancana's efforts have materialized to date, and that several of the plans still are working and may eventually pay off. The memorandum then went into the Belletti situation and reported that Colonel Edwards had no knowledge of the wiretap. The memorandum concluded with the following paragraph. Colonel Edwards advised that only Mr. Bissell, Deputy Director of Plans, CIA, and two others in the CIA were aware of the Giancana-Maheu activity in behalf of the CIA's program, and that Alan Dulles was completely unaware of Edwards' contact with Maheu in this connection. He added that Mr. Bissell, during his recent briefings of General Taylor and Attorney General in connection with the inquiries into CIA related to the Cuban situation, told the Attorney General that some of the CIA's associated planning included the use of Giancana and the underworld against Castro. Subsequently, on March 6, 1967, J. Edgar Hoover sent to the Attorney General a letter with an accompanying March 6, 1967 FBI memorandum entitled Central Intelligence Agency Intentions to Send Hoodlums to Cuba to Assassinate Castro. The memorandum referred to the Belletti wiretap matter and stated that the FBI checked matter with CIA on 5/3/61 and learned CIA was using Robert Maheu as an intermediary go-between with Sam Giancana relative to CIA's dirty business, anti-Castro activities. By letter 5/22/61, we furnished former Attorney General Kennedy a memorandum containing a rundown on CIA's involvement in this. The original of the letter and memorandum were returned to us for filing purposes. A copy of that memorandum is being attached to instant letter being sent to Attorney General. On 5/9/62, Kennedy discussed with the with the director a number of matters, including admission by CIA that Robert Maheu had been hired by that agency to approach Sam Giancana to have Castro assassinated at the cost of $150,000. Kennedy stated that he had issued orders that CIA should never undertake such steps again without first checking with the Department of Justice, and stated because of this matter, it would be difficult to prosecute Giancana or Robert Maheu then or in the future. The memorandum stated that the FBI had learned on June 20, 1963, that the CIA contacts with the Mafia had continued up until that time when they were reportedly cut off. The FBI memorandum also stated that it appeared that one Mafia member involved in the plans is using his prior connections with the CIA to his best advantage. A contemporaneous FBI memorandum dated March 6, 1967, stated that Robert Kennedy, following his briefings in May of 1962, informed the FBI on May 9th about the briefing. He, Robert Kennedy, indicated that a few days prior thereto, he had been advised by the CIA that an intermediary had been hired by the CIA to approach Sam Giancana with a proposition of paying $150,000 to hire some gunmen to go into Cuba and kill Castro. The memorandum further continued that Mr. Kennedy stated that upon learning CIA had not cleared its action in hiring the go-between and Giancana with the Department of Justice, he issued orders that the CIA should never take such steps without checking in with the Department of Justice. Mr. Kennedy further advised that because of this matter, it would be very difficult to initiate any prosecution against Giancana, as Giancana could immediately bring out the fact that the United States government had approached him to arrange for the assassination of Castro. He's like, damn, see, I'm out here trying to get rid of the Mafia, and y'all ass going behind our back making deals with him. Right then and there. His brother is the president. That's where it's going to get deep. When Sheffield Edwards and the CIA's General Counsel briefed Robert Kennedy on May 7, 1962 concerning the Phase 1 assassination effort by the CIA, there was no evidence to indicate that during their briefing, Robert Kennedy told the CIA personnel that he already had known of this information because of prior information received from the FBI. Colonel Edwards, in his 1975 recorded interview, confirmed the statement in March 6, 1967 FBI memorandum that Attorney General Kennedy stated that the CIA should never undertake the use of Mafia people again without first checking with the Department of Justice because it would be difficult to prosecute such people in the future. According to Edwards, the CIA people knew about the plans while they were going on, where himself, the CIA people knew about the plan while they were going on, and where himself, his case officer Bezell, Alan Dulles, Director of Central Intelligence until November 1961, and General Cabell during this period of time. Both Dulles and Cabell are now dead. How the plans got started. There is an inconsistency between the testimony of Richard Bezell and Colonel Edwards concerning how the plans got started in the first place. According to Bezell, the original approach was made to the agency by the syndicate personnel because they had their own very strong motivations for carrying out this hit. They had been powerful under Batista in Cuba, and they had a very lucrative set of interests for the syndicates, and they had in effect been thrown out, and so that they had the strongest sort of reason for anti-Castro sentiment on their own, which meaning after Castro overthrew Batista, he kicked all the Mafia out, shut down their casinos and all that shit, so they had motive. Bezell said he first learned about this from Sheffield Edwards and that he had also talked with Alan Dulles about the matter. Whereas Bezell testified that he first heard of this possibility of using Mafia syndicate resources from Sheffield Edwards. Edwards testified that for his first contact was a request by Bezell, who asked Edwards if I had any assets would that would be available into the syndicate. So both of them pointing their fingers at each other. When asked about the inconsistency between his own testimony and that of Sheffield Edwards, concerning whether or not Edwards approached Basile first or Basile approached Edwards first. Basile stated that it is possible that my recollection is wrong. I think I was standing on that as my recollection, but I seem to remember rather clearly that it was from him, Edwards, that I first learned of the possibility of this operation, and that he came to see me for this purpose rather than me sending for him. Now, could I just say that I had several conversations with Chef Edwards on this matter? And is it very possible that in a subsequent conversation I did take the initiative and send for and discuss it with him? The phase 1 case officer stated that he believed it was Basile who first approached Edwards about making a contact with a CIA intermediary. The case officer further stated that although he ultimately became aware of the fact that the people contacted by the CIA intermediary were syndicate members initially, neither he nor the intermediary knew this to be a fact. Rather, he said he thought these people whom the intermediary contacted were gangster type people who were not necessarily members of the syndicate. Possible White House direction or approval of plans. When asked whether or not he had discussions with any official in the Eisenhower administration concerning the development of an executive action capability, Basile replied, "Not to my recollection, and I think I am almost sure that I did not." Basile stated that he had no clear recollection of any discussion with anyone in the Eisenhower administration concerning any plans to kill Fidel Castro, but there could have been. He said that if it would have occurred at all during the Eisenhower administration, it would have been with Gordon Gray, the Kennedy administration. Basile testified that although my recollection of this is far from clear, I am satisfied that very early in the Kennedy administration, I did participate in conversation with someone in the White House concerning the plan of what was called an executive action capability, which was defined in substance as a capability of the agency to carry out assassinations, if required. When asked with whom these conversations occurred, Basile said, "I am almost certain it was either Walt Rostow, Deputy Assistant to the President for National Security, or McGeorge Bundy, Presidential Assistant for National Security, or probably the former, and possibly both." When asked to state what specifically was discussed in these conversations, Basile said, "My recollection, which isn't too specific, is that this was a discussion of the desirability of developing such a capability within the CIA that presumably would be a small special unit and highly compartmented from the rest of the organization." Basile said that he had no specific knowledge, but that he had a great deal of confidence that the two gentlemen whose names I have mentioned would not have discussed this with me or encouraged any course of action that they were not confident the president would approve. Later in his testimony, Basile said that the possibility of using syndicate people to carry out an assassination attempt against Castro was discussed by me. Again, I think probably with Walt Rostow. It may possibly have been discussed directly with McGeorge Bundy, but I suspect that it was through Rostow, who was then Bundy's assistant on his staff. My impression, but again I must emphasize that this is uncertain impression, was that I was encouraged to go ahead with the investigation and planning of this operation, and by investigation I mean simply to find out what would be involved to make some assessment of the likelihood of success and other aspects of the matter. According to Basile, he was vague as to the final outcome of that attempt. He said that he had no recollection of a specific authorization that it should go forward. I believe, however, that we probably did move to be in a position to carry it out or authorize it if authorization were received. He said that he believed my own recollection of the final stages of the plan is vague because the plan involved furnishing probably some money and such items as pills or other devices through a number of cutouts or intermediaries to a group which we ourselves, of course, did not in any direct sense control. So basically, they're trying to say the mafia, after we didn't get authorization, mafia tried to do it themselves. This was not an operation of such a character that the communication would run through agency channels because it was underground, or that authorization on the spot would be by agency personnel, or that the agency could precisely and tightly control it. The blame game.